Hey guys, so in this video I'm just going to do a detailed overview and walk around of my go-kart. So this is it. The chassis is a Aero AX9. It's from, I believe, 2006. And it has a PRD Fireball engine, which is a 2-cycle 125cc water-cooled engine. This is a typical chassis you'd see for any 2-cycle class and some 4-cycle classes. That would include like a shifter, or this is a tag motor, which is a common 2-cycle motor, or like a 100cc Yamaha. They would all use this chassis. All the motors in the tag class have a centrifugal clutch and an electric start, so they have a battery and a starter on board. So starting with kind of the details of the motor, here's the carburetor. There's 2 needles to adjust the jetting, I guess is what you'd say. One's for the high speed, the high RPMs, one's for the low speed or the low RPMs. This is the intake, the air box, the exhaust. The clutch is here, so it's a centrifugal clutch, so it engages once the engine reaches a certain RPM. It's chain driven, and you can usually change the top speed by changing the gear on the axle, and with this gearing the top speed is about 63 miles an hour, which is for a short sprint track. The typical top speeds you'll see in the tag are about 60 to 70 miles an hour. The overall top speed with the right gearing is over 90, which you'll see if you race this on a full-size car track. So the engine is water cooled, so we can see on the other side we have a radiator. And there's actually a water pump, and the water pump is driven off the rear axle. So that's right here. And you can see there's just these bands connecting it to the rear axle, so when the rear axle spins, it turns the water pump. Now let's go over some details of the chassis, starting with the front. So the front tires are, the wheels are 5 inches diameter, and the front tires are 4.5 inches wide. Here's the front spindle. The placement of the wheels on the spindle is adjustable by these spacers. These are actually removable spacers. So if you could take the wheel off, you could take these spacers off and actually move them to the outside of the wheel, and that could bring this wheel in or out. Right here, the kingpin that holds the spindle in, this can actually adjust in different orientations like this, and that'll affect your camber or caster of the wheel. The tie rods, here we can adjust the toe by lengthening or shortening this tie rod. Also, the steering Ackerman is adjustable by moving to a different hole here. There's also multiple holes over here that you can adjust to. The other thing we can do in the front is adjust the front ride height, which can be adjusted by moving these spacers to the top or bottom of the spindle. And another handling change we can make on the front of most modern carts is there's a mechanism to stiffen or soften the front of the chassis. In this chassis, there's actually a clamp here, and you can see that these 2 bars on the chassis aren't completely connected. There's a gap right there, and tightening and loosening this clamp will engage this as a solid bar or leave it loose. a lot of karts just have a removable bar that you can bolt in or pull out. So moving to the back, the rear width is adjustable just by these hubs can slide in and out. And then you can tighten it with this pinch bolt. And here's the rear tire. It's also the wheel is 5 inches in diameter, and the rear tire width is 7 inches wide. There's 3 bearings holding the axle into the chassis, but typically, except for a very high horsepower class like a shifter, you'll leave the 3rd bearing either completely out or you'll leave it loose. So this is just spinning here, and you can see on this one there's these set screws actually holding the axle in. The bearings are inside this bearing cassette. That's just bolted to the chassis here. A lot of the modern chassis have a adjustable ride height in the rear, and on this cart, let's see. That's adjusted by rotating this thing. Another handling adjustment we can do here is add or remove extra bars or seat stays that attach to the seat. So this goes from the seat to the chassis on the bearing cassette. I have one here. Some karts will have another one on this side. Some karts have as many as 2 on each side. It's pretty common. Okay, so moving on to the brakes. Here's the master cylinder. And on this kart we only have rear brakes. So the rear brake is right on the rear axle. And the axle is just a solid axle. No differential or anything. And some karts, usually the shifters, will have a front brake, so there'll be another master cylinder and brake discs that kind of attach to the spindle here. And some tags will have front brakes as well, and then the lower horsepower classes usually don't have front brakes. So the gas tank obviously is right here in the middle of the driver's feet. The sizes vary. This is a very large one. You don't need this much fuel to do a typical sprint race, which is usually anywhere from just like 5 to 10 minutes long. And the fuel for a tag, we usually run around 100 octane, depending on what motor you're running. Like the Yamahas and the lower horsepower stuff, you might be able to run on pump gas. Since it's a 2-cycle, we do mix 2-cycle oil in with the fuel. And finally, just to go over the weight of the cart, this cart weighs about 180 pounds. That's with fuel and water in the radiator and everything, with no ballast. The lower horsepower classes, like the Yamaha, which doesn't have it's an air-cooled engine, doesn't have a radiator, it doesn't have the battery. The carts will be a little lighter. The shifters, which have the shifter hardware and the transmission and everything, will be the heaviest. So I'd say the range might be 160 to 200. And usually the minimum weight to race, depending on the class, can be anywhere from around 330 to 400 pounds. And in the tag class that I race in with this motor, the minimum weight is 350 pounds. So it is common if you race to add ballast to the cart to meet the minimum weight. And the most common place to mount the ballast is on the seat. So I can show you where mine is. Here's 2 of these pucks. And then here's 2 more pieces of ballast on the back of the seat. So in total, those 4 pieces is about 15 pounds. And so to start the car, there's a battery back here. Where the battery is located varies. Some carts it'll be on the side, kind of in front of the radiator. And not all carts have batteries. Only carts that have electric start, which is mainly just the tags, the shifters, and things like the Yamaha don't have the battery on board. I'm just charging this. These wouldn't normally be here. And then there's the starter. And the wiring also varies. In this case, I have it wired to start right here. And the final thing I'll show you is the gauge. So this is an electronic gauge and data acquisition system. And this one, I've got it set up to read my RPMs, which is this sensor here, and also my water temperature, which is this sensor. These are just wired to go to this thing. And I can just quickly show you guys. Whoops. Here we can see some stuff like my past lap times and breakdowns of my laps, for example. So that's about all I can think of. If you guys have any questions or want to see anything specifically, let me know.